She smiled and wished me death as if it were a toast. The words cut through the air in the room like shattered glass. I stood motionless, staring at my own daughter, listening to each syllable emerge from her mouth with the naturalness of someone asking for a glass of water. It wasn't a rant, it wasn't a misinterpreted joke. It was a cruel sentence, spoken directly to me with cold, calculating eyes. In that instant, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. I, who had dedicated decades of my life to ensuring education, comfort, and opportunities, found myself reduced to a disposable burden. Ingratitude had a face, a voice, and even a familiar scent. How could a mother who had always provided for the home suddenly become its greatest enemy? The silence that followed was more deafening than any scream. I heard the clock on the wall ticking dryly, as if marking the countdown of my own usefulness. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just a phrase spoken in the heat of anger. It was a reflection of what she, and perhaps others around me, really thought of me. An old burden, a life considered expendable. I felt my heart tighten like a clenched fist. The air felt heavy, dense, difficult to pull. At the same time, a strange clarity began to dawn within me. If I was seen as an obstacle, it was because there was something they desired above my existence. Something I possessed that, deep down, represented more value to them than my own life. The danger wasn't just in the cruelty of the phrase. It was in what it revealed behind it. Hidden intentions, silent plans, desires that could no longer bear to be disguised. Had I always been fooled by smiles and mechanical hugs, when in truth I was measured in figures, papers, and signatures? In that moment, I understood that my life was like a candle still burning in the wind. Fragile, vulnerable, but illuminating a space others wanted to take. And if she dared to say that out loud, what else could she be plotting in silence? That question kept hammering away inside me, echoing like a secret about to explode, forever changing everything I believed to be true. After that moment, the house never sounded the same to me again. Every corner seemed to carry a hidden whisper. Every closed door concealed intentions I dared not name. I walked down the hallway and felt sidelong glances, as if I were an intruder in my own life. My daughter's words didn't just hang in the air. They stuck to me like an indelible stain. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that those words hadn't come out of nowhere. I remembered small gestures that once seemed trivial. The plate carelessly placed in front of me, the impatient sigh when I took too long to sign a document, the rush to comment on my fatigue as if it were proof of incapacity. At the time I ignored it. I thought they were mere moments. But now I see they were rehearsals, preparing the ground for something bigger. I feel the bitter taste of betrayal even in simple meals. The sound of the kettle boiling reminds me of my racing heart when I recall my daughter's cold gaze. And I wonder, how can the same mouth that once said, "Mom, you are my safe haven," now spit out the sentence that it would be better if I didn't exist? The living room became the stage for a silent trial, where I was accused simply for being alive. It's curious how loneliness sets in even when surrounded by people. Others' laughter seems fake, and I find myself smiling out of politeness, when inside I carry a weight no one can imagine. It's in this sharing of unspoken secrets that many people find a place of refuge. That's why so many choose to remain here, following each revelation, because they know how much it hurts to be invisible even within one's own family. Nights became long. Lying in bed, I stare at the ceiling and feel the echo of that sentence like a hammer pounding in my mind. And the silence of the early morning only intensifies the question that still haunts me. Was that just a cruel mistake or the first step in a plan already in motion? What I discovered next showed me that the answer was anything but simple, and that the chasm was much deeper than I had imagined. Silence began to haunt me like a shadow. It wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a suffocating presence, full of unspoken meanings. I walked through the house and noticed that every detail around me had changed color. The painting on the wall that had once conveyed serenity now seemed to watch me with judgment. The morning light streaming through the window no longer warmed me, but only illuminated the weight of loneliness I carried. There was a new emptiness in my daughter's gestures, a calculated coldness, as if she had already erased me from her life. I saw her gaze measure my every move, as if assessing how much more she could extract from someone. And it was in that gaze that I felt the deepest wound, the realization that, to her, I was no longer a mother, merely an obstacle between her and something she avidly desired. The consequences of this contempt went beyond the emotional. I began to question whether my days were truly safe within that house. The doors that once closed only to protect privacy now felt like barriers erected against me. The sound of my cell phone vibrating on the table sent a shiver down my spine, as if each message concealed a new strategy to push me into oblivion. There were moments when I almost convinced myself it was all just an exaggeration of my tired mind. But then came the little shocks, like when I heard, in the distance, my daughter talking about money in a low voice, as if she were organizing something that shouldn't reach my ears. It was in this contrast between the hope of being wrong and the fear of being right that my soul was torn apart. And so, each day felt like a taut rope about to snap. I found myself trying to maintain a fragile balance, like someone crossing a bridge suspended over an abyss. One false step and everything could collapse. The most painful thing was realizing that perhaps the push wasn't coming from distant enemies, but from the very person I'd brought into this world. I didn't know it yet, but the next piece that would unfold in this game would show that that phrase wasn't just cruel. It was the harbinger of something planned, calculated, and far darker than my suspicions dared imagine. Sometimes I'd find myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at my own face, searching for answers in the marks time had left. The wrinkles told me stories of battles won, of sleepless nights, of hugs given when no one else believed. And at the same time, they reflected the shadow of recent rejection, as if each line were a reminder that my own daughter no longer saw me as a person, but as an obstacle. It was strange how the sweetest memories surfaced in contrast to that coldness. I remembered her as a child, running barefoot through the yard, calling my name with a joy that filled the house. Today, the same sound of her voice carried venom. This contrast hurt, but it also kept me alert. After all, how could love turn so quickly to indifference? On silent nights, I lay listening to the creaking of the house's wood. Each sound seemed to carry a hidden warning, and amidst these warnings, a nagging certainty arose. There was more behind that cruel sentence than mere impulsiveness. It was like a puzzle of which I had only one piece, and yet I could already see the dark pattern taking shape. Sometimes my heart wanted to believe there was still room for reconciliation, that perhaps the pain had been the result of a moment of anger, and that everything could be undone with a sincere apology. But the coldness in their gestures, the haste in their conversations, the averted gaze, everything indicated I wasn't mistaken. And it's at this point that many feel the urge to support this journey, leaving a silent sign that the message touched them, because they know that love, when broken within a family, leaves scars that don't easily fade. Most disturbing, however, was the feeling that I was only on the surface of something much larger. As if a door were ajar, revealing a dark corridor I still had to walk. And at the end of that corridor, I sensed I would find evidence that would go beyond any assumption. I began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed, as if my eyes had suddenly learned to see what had always been right in front of me. The silence of the house, for example, was no longer just silence. It was the muffled sound of secrets. When I entered the kitchen, I felt the conversation stop a second before. As I crossed the living room, I noticed papers being hurriedly hidden in drawers. It was like walking onto a stage where everyone already knew the plot, except me. Amid this dense atmosphere, my own memories took on a new weight. I found myself recalling the past like someone searching for clues among old photographs. I remembered the first time I signed a document to help her achieve something, never imagining that that gesture of trust would become a weapon against me. The images came to me like flashes, my firm hand holding hers when I was still a child, now replaced by nimble fingers trying to extract each signature from me with calculated coldness. The contrast suffocated me. On one hand, my maternal instinct still pulsed within me, wanting to believe there was room for redemption, that an apology could wash away the venom of my words. On the other, fear warned me that the coldness was no accident, but part of something larger, a hidden intention I was only beginning to decipher. It was like looking at a seemingly calm river, knowing that beneath it lay violent currents ready to sweep away anyone who was careless. Sometimes I found myself imagining the future. I thought about what it would be like to grow old, treated like dead weight, disposable, ignored within my own family. The fear of this scenario kept me awake at night, but at the same time, it lit a silent flame of resilience. I knew I couldn't let myself wither under the weight of rejection. Something inside me told me I would still have a voice, even if they tried to silence me. And it was in this state of constant vigil that I began to notice clearer signs, small cracks in the disguise, signs that the game unfolding around me was about to reveal itself in ways I never could have imagined. The nights began to weigh more heavily than the days. In the darkness of my room, I felt my tired body sink into the mattress, but my mind remained alert, as if an invisible thread were pulling me from my rest. The silence of the early morning wasn't rest. It was fertile ground for thoughts that gnawed at me. I closed my eyes and saw scenes repeating themselves. My daughter's cold gaze, the hastily closed drawers, the dry sound of papers being folded. Each memory was like a distant drumbeat, announcing something that hadn't yet taken shape but was already approaching. There were times when my memory betrayed me. I remembered her as a child, her face smeared with birthday cake, blowing out the candles with naive joy. This flash of tenderness clashed with a woman who now stared at me unblinkingly, like someone weighing things on a scale. This duality wounded me and, at the same time, strengthened me. It was like walking on a moonlit road, half her face in shadow, half in light. I began to feel the weight of time differently. It wasn't just the approach of old age, but the awareness that every minute carried a new risk. The sound of footsteps in the hallway in the wee hours of the morning made me hold my breath. A louder door slammed shut like a warning that I wasn't safe, even in the space that was supposed to welcome me. At the same time, there was a spark that refused to go out. The same flame that had kept me steadfast through so many struggles now burned silently, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. With every cold gesture, every calculated silence, I understood that I was facing something greater than simple family disagreements. It was a carefully woven plot, in which I was the most fragile, but also the most unexpected piece. Because despite all the pain, there was a strength within me they didn't know. And this force began to move, still discreet, like a wind that precedes the storm, ready to reveal secrets that would change everything. What once seemed like a mere nuisance began to transform into concrete evidence. It was no longer just averted glances or awkward silences, but actual movements, small slips that, when added together, revealed larger intentions. A document left on the table, a conversation abruptly interrupted upon noticing my presence, a call answered in the hallway with a muffled voice. Each fragment was like a piece of glass reflecting a piece of truth. I felt watched, as if the house had eyes. The feeling of being constantly measured weighed, as if they were calculating not only my steps but also my time. This awareness grew within me until it became impossible to ignore. It was as if I lived inside a chessboard, where their every move sought to corner me, yet they still didn't realize I was also learning how to move my pieces. The contrast was brutal. On the one hand, they acted like silent predators, certain their prey didn't notice the siege. On the other, I had a strength built up from years of survival, from battles fought in silence against scornful looks, against doors that had closed on me long before this family betrayal. This experience became my invisible armor. I began to piece together each detail, mentally organizing the signs that had previously seemed isolated. It was like putting together a puzzle in complete darkness, feeling the pieces, but already recognizing that the resulting figure would be anything but innocent. The weight of the discovery wasn't yet complete, but it was already enough to make my breath catch in my chest. It's curious how, when faced with stories like these, many who listen end up reflecting on themselves, remembering moments when they, too, perceived the hidden poison within their own homes. And sometimes sharing these memories, discussing how silence also spoke louder in their lives, is a way to break the isolation they try to impose on us. The game was set, I could already feel it. and there was something about to unfold that would make every piece fall into place relentlessly. The pieces I was piecing together began to form a disturbing pattern. It wasn't just greed, it was haste. I could sense it in their gestures, in the rhythm of their hushed conversations, as if time were their enemy and my existence were the obstacle to be removed. This urgency kept me in a constant state of alert, as if each breath could be my last before an inevitable revelation. I walked through the house, and every object seemed to carry a new meaning. The loosely closed drawer in the office, the forgotten pen on the desk, the half-crumpled envelope inside a bag. These were small details, but to me they screamed like silent sirens. It was like walking through a minefield where only I could see the traces of destruction about to unfold. At the same time, there were moments when a strange serenity would come over me. It was as if, amidst the chaos, I could see myself from the outside, recognizing the strength I never needed to proclaim. This duality guided me, fear and courage walking side by side, like two shadows stretching across the same body. I thought about what I had endured before. The sidelong glances on the street, the condescending treatment from strangers, the cruel subtlety of those who believe our color and age make us invisible. If I survived that, why couldn't I survive the poison in my own home? This memory didn't comfort me, but it reminded me that within me there was solid ground, capable of bearing the weight of betrayal. It was in this contrast between the emerging clarity and the uncertainty that still surrounded me that I held firm. Each day felt like a test, an invitation to collapse, but also a chance to observe more, to bide my time. Their silence was too loud to ignore, and I knew the next move wouldn't come from me, but from them. And when it came, I would be ready to see what until then they believed they could hide forever. I began to realize that the house itself was becoming a distorted mirror of my own life. During the day, the walls reflected normality. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, objects rested in their usual places, and anyone looking from outside would see only routine. But when night fell, every shadow seemed to take on a life of its own. Every dark hallway carried the memory of muffled voices, of secrets hidden in hastily closed drawers. It was as if two worlds coexisted in the same space, and I was forced to walk between them, trying to decipher which was real. This duplicity eroded my confidence. There were times when I thought I was overreacting, creating monsters in my mind, searching for signs where there were none. But then, the smallest gesture was enough to shatter any illusion. A cold look, a conversation interrupted mid-sentence, an object that moved without explanation. These were small cracks, but enough to reveal what was being hidden. The contrast between clarity and doubt kept me in a constant state of vigil. In the morning, I still allowed myself the timid hope that it was all just a misunderstanding, that there was still room for dialogue. But by nightfall, that hope faded, and what remained was the silent fear that I was about to be swallowed by something much greater than I had imagined. I felt like someone walking a road lit only by the moon. The light was enough to show the way, but insufficient to reveal what lurked on the margins. I walked steadily, but aware that any unexpected movement could surprise me. It was this fragile balance that I maintained each day, alternating between the desire to believe and the certainty that something dark was about to surface. And deep down I already knew, when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't come in whispers, but in bangs capable of forever breaking the silence they tried to impose on me. The day the truth was revealed came not with explosions, but with the weight of an impossible-to-disguise silence. I found myself faced with the evidence that confirmed everything my heart already knew. Papers, messages, signs that finally fit together like pieces of a dark puzzle. And in that moment, instead of fear, I felt an unexpected calm. It was like walking through a storm and suddenly finding the air clean and breathable, even though I knew there were still clouds around. It was at that moment that I understood. It wasn't just about what they planned against me, but about the strength I carried without needing to announce it. My whole life, I'd grown accustomed to surviving in environments that tried to erase me, whether by the color of my skin, my age, or the silence imposed by circumstances. But there, faced with the most intimate betrayal, I realized that my resistance was also my victory. The poison they tried to plant within me was becoming the root of something no one could uproot. The images of that day remain etched in my mind. The table scattered with documents, the look of surprise on faces that never imagined I was paying attention, the weight of each word cutting through the air like a knife. It was there that I understood the power of transforming pain into clarity, rejection into strategy, humiliation into strength. And this strength wasn't born from without. It was born within me, forged in the silence that so many mistake for weakness. It's curious how, when we share stories like this, many feel an urge to support, to leave a mark that they too recognize themselves in the pain and overcoming. Each gesture of interaction is like a silent sign of belonging, that this journey is not lived alone, but shared in invisible layers of solidarity. That's why, if this narrative touched your heart, the gesture of liking, commenting, and subscribing becomes more than a click. It's a testament that you too believe that dignity is not negotiable, that kindness does not mean submission, and that the voice of those who resist must echo. Closing this chapter doesn't mean closing the wounds, but transforming them into scars that shine like medals of survival. And if there's one thing that remains an indisputable truth, it's that nothing can erase the strength of a woman who learned to stand up even when the world tried to break her.